Before starting, you can join my Patreon for more spicy and uncensored BL stories. Link is in the channel description.
The used bookshop smelled of time and paper, and Soren had been on his feet for 7 hours. That was not unusual. He had been on his feet most of the pregnancy, because sitting meant stopping, and stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant admitting that he had been alone for 8.5 months in a city that was not his home, carrying children he had never told anyone about. So he stood. He shelved. He rang up customers who asked when his due date was and smiled without answering. The suppressants had stopped working around month 6. Not because he stopped taking them. He had simply reached the limit of what his body could ignore. Omega biology was not designed to be suppressed through a pregnancy. Every day now, he felt the heat at the edges of his control. A low hum beneath his skin that he had learned to walk through as though it weren't there. He had learned to walk through a lot of things. The shop was quiet that afternoon. Pax Wilder was in the back office, doing inventory, and Soren was alone on the floor, straightening a shelf of worn poetry anthologies. The contractions had started 3 hours ago. He had counted them. He had decided they were Braxton Hicks. He had decided he would finish his shift and then go upstairs to his single room and drink tea and pretend his body was not preparing to do something he was not ready for. That was the part no one understood about survival. It was not dramatic. It was a series of small decisions to keep moving, made over and over, until moving became automatic and the fear settled somewhere deep enough that you could pretend it was not there. He reached for a book on the top shelf. His hand closed around the spine. And then the floor tilted. Not dramatically. Not like a movie. Just a slow, quiet unsteadiness that started in his knees and moved upward. And he thought, for one clear moment, I should sit down. He did not sit down. He tried to take a step toward the counter. His legs forgot how. The book fell from his hand. The world went soft at the edges, and he heard himself hit the floor from somewhere far away, and the last thing he was aware of was the smell of old paper and dust, and a voice saying his name from a great distance. Pax found him 3 minutes later. Pax Wilder was a beater who had owned the bookshop for 12 years and employed Soren on instinct. He saw a heavily pregnant Omega with good references and a precise way of handling customers, and he had not asked questions. He had not asked where Soren was from, or why Soren rented the room upstairs instead of finding something larger, or why Soren never mentioned the father. Pax had lost his own partner to a complicated delivery 7 years ago. He knew when to let a person keep their silence. He found Soren on his side, breathing unevenly, one hand curled around nothing. Pax moved. He knelt. He checked Soren's pulse, thready but present. He did not panic. He had been here before, in a different room, and the memory was sharp, but he used it to stay calm. He took Soren's phone from the counter. He opened the emergency contacts. There was one entry, Dr. Ren Calloway. He dialed. Dr. Calloway answered on the second ring. She was a beater who had delivered mafia babies in this city for 20 years, and she knew the Ashfield twins the way a gardener knows the weather, not personally, but intimately, by the patterns they left behind. When she heard Soren's name, she did not react. When she heard his address and his condition, she gave Pax clear instructions and said she would be at the hospital in 15 minutes. Then she made a second call. Corwin Ashfield was in the Community Legal Aid office when his phone vibrated. He had been reviewing case files, not his usual work, but he had stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the family business, and this was what he did instead. He read applications from people who could not afford lawyers. He wrote checks to the fund the twins had established quietly, without announcement, as though they were trying to pay off a debt that had nothing to do with money. He saw Dr. Calloway's name on the screen and answered without thinking. Corwin. Her voice was steady. I need you to come to St. Jude's. And I need you to bring your brother. Why? Soren is in early labor. He collapsed in the shop where he works. I am on my way now. The world stopped. Not metaphorically. Corwin Ashfield's alpha body went still in a way that had nothing to do with decision and everything to do with instinct. His scent shifted, cedar and rain, sharpening with something he could not name. He was already standing. He was already moving. Which floor? He said. Not a question. Maternity. I will meet you there. Ren. He stopped at the door. Is he okay? A pause. He is alive. He is alone. He has been alone for a long time, Corwin. I can tell you that much from one glance at his file. Corwin ended the call. He found Leith in the car before he explained why. Leith Ashfield did not ask questions. He heard his brother's tone, that low, controlled quiet that meant something had already happened, and he got in the driver's seat without a word. Corwin told him as they drove. Leith listened. His hands stayed steady on the wheel. His scent, amber and smoke, did not shift, because Leith had learned to control his reactions the way some men learned to hold their breath underwater. He let the information settle. He processed. And when he spoke, his voice was the same even tone it had been for the last 8 months, since the guilt had settled into something operational rather than destructive. He came back to the city. Yes. And he didn't tell us. No. 8.5 months, Corwin. I know. Leith said nothing else. He did not need to. They both carried the same weight, the knowledge that they had promised Soren forever, and then failed to protect him from the very world they ruled. An Omega betrayed not by enemies but by the 2 Alphas who should have been his shelter. They had not done it intentionally. That was the worst part. They had simply believed the wrong person, acted on the wrong information, and by the time they understood what they had done, Soren was gone. 7 months. That was how long it had taken them to realize Cass had lied. 7 months of searching. 7 months of learning that Soren had left the city, and that no one knew where he had gone, and that the friends who might have helped him had been turned away by the same lies that had turned Corwin and Leith against him. And now, 8.5 months pregnant, in labor, collapsed in a bookshop. Leith drove faster. They arrived at St. Jude's at 4:47 p.m. The maternity floor was quiet. A nurse directed them to a room at the end of the hall, and Corwin's alpha instincts registered something wrong before his mind caught up. The door was partially open. He heard voices, not medical, not urgent. A man's voice, low and professional, reading something. Leith reached the door first. The scene inside was not what either of them expected. Soren was on the hospital bed, pale and breathing through what looked like a contraction, his hand gripping the rail. He was conscious. He was watching the man who stood beside his bed with a look of exhausted weariness. The man was holding papers. He was a lawyer. Corwin recognized him, Miles Herrick, one of the Ashfield family's external counsels, hired on Cass's recommendation. Miles was holding a document in one hand and a pen in the other. Miles. Leith's voice was quiet. The kind of quiet that made the air in the room change. Miles turned. He did not look guilty. He looked professional, which was worse. Leith. Corwin. I didn't expect you here. Clearly. Leith stepped into the room. His scent shifted, just slightly, a warning that only another alpha would fully understand. What are you doing? Miles held up the papers. I was asked to bring these for Mr. Varel's signature. Standard relinquishment documents. Given his condition, it seemed prudent to have them ready. Corwin moved past him. He did not look at Miles. He looked at Soren. Soren Varel was 8.5 months pregnant, exhausted, alone, and in early labor. His scent told the story more clearly than his face did. Lavender, but faded, like a garden that had not been watered in a long time. The scent of an Omega who had been suppressing so thoroughly that his natural fragrance had become a ghost of itself. There were dark circles under his eyes. His hair was longer than Corwin remembered. His hand was still gripping the rail. And he was looking at Corwin with an expression that broke something inside the alpha. Not anger. Not fear. Wariness. The wariness of someone who had been hurt so badly that he no longer expected safety from the people who were supposed to provide it. That document, Leith said, his voice still quiet, is a voluntary relinquishment of all claims to the Ashfield estate, including any and all claims arising from a prior bond or offspring. It includes a non-disclosure clause. It is irrevocable upon signature. Miles blinked. That's correct. I wrote that template. Leith's voice did not change. 3 years ago. For Cass Holt's acquisitions. It was designed to be used when we needed to ensure a counterparty had no legal standing to challenge us after a deal. Miles said nothing. Who told you to bring it here? I received instructions from Cass Holt this morning. He said it was urgent. He said Mr. Varel had returned to the city and that the document needed to be signed before the birth. Corwin turned. His alpha instincts were fully engaged now, not protective in the romantic sense, but protective in the way a fire is protective of the space it has already burned. Cass gave you instructions to have an Omega in labor sign a legal waiver without a witness, without counsel, without anyone who represents his interests. Miles hesitated. Mr. Holt said it was standard procedure. Leith pulled out his phone. He dialed. He put it on speaker. Cass Holt answered on the third ring. Leith, I was about to call you. I heard some news. Cass. Leith's voice was still quiet. Did you send Miles Herrick to St. Jude's maternity ward with a relinquishment document for Soren Varel to sign? A pause. Then Cass's voice, smooth and unconcerned. I did. I thought it would be cleaner to handle it before the birth. You know how messy these things can get when an Omega has leverage after the fact. Leverage. Corwin's voice was barely a whisper. Corwin, I know this is emotional for you, but you need to think practically. Soren has been gone for 8 months. He shows up heavily pregnant at the exact moment the family is transitioning to legitimate business. The timing is convenient. I was protecting the estate. Leith looked at Soren. Soren was watching him. The wariness was still there, but something else had entered it. Something like curiosity. Like he was watching to see what they would do. Leith held up the phone. His voice dropped. Cass, listen carefully. I am recording this call. You just admitted to sending a lawyer to pressure an Omega in labor into signing away his rights, without representation, without a witness, under the justification that he might have leverage after giving birth. That is coercion. That is a crime. And you did it using my family's legal counsel without my authorization. Cass's voice sharpened. Leith, you're being dramatic. I was trying to protect you. Protect us. Corwin stepped closer to the phone. His scent spiked, cedar and rain, sharp with the kind of fury that only comes from realizing you trusted the wrong person for years. You lied to us, Cass. You told us Soren was feeding information to a rival family. You gave us evidence we never verified. You made us believe the person we loved was a traitor, and we were stupid enough to believe you. Corwin. You watched him leave. You watched us fall apart. And now, when he comes back with our children, you try to legally erase him before the birth is even over. Silence. Then Cass's voice, colder, you have no proof of any of that. Keep listening to your voicemail. Leith ended the call. He looked at Miles. You're fired. Leave the document. Walk out of this hospital. If I find out you contacted Soren again, I will personally ensure you never practice law in this city. Miles left. The papers stayed on the bedside table. Soren did not touch them. Corwin turned to look at Soren. The Omega was still pale, still breathing through what might have been another contraction, still gripping the rail. But there was something new in his face. Something that looked, for the first time, like the beginning of not being alone. Why? Soren said. His voice was hoarse. Why did you do that? Corwin could not answer. He did not have words. Leith spoke instead. Because it was wrong. That's not a reason. It's the only reason we have left. Soren's jaw tightened. Another contraction hit. He did not make a sound, but his hand tightened on the rail until his knuckles went white. Corwin moved before he thought, stepping closer, reaching for the rail, offering a steady surface without touching Soren. Soren looked at his hand, then at his face. I didn't ask you to come, Soren said, between breaths. I know. I don't trust you. I know. I spent 8.5 months alone. I taught myself how to do this without you. I don't need you here. Corwin did not move his hand. I know. Soren stared at him. The contraction eased. His grip on the rail loosened, but he did not pull away from Corwin's presence. And when the next contraction came, 10 minutes later, Leith was on the other side of the bed, holding the rail with the same quiet steadiness. They did not touch Soren. They did not try to soothe him. They stood where they were, two alphas who had failed the only omega who mattered, and they did not move. And somewhere in the fog of early labor, Soren stopped wanting to make them leave. The labor stretched into the night, and the room became something none of them had expected. Dr. Calloway arrived within the hour, calm and efficient, her presence settling the medical staff the way a harbor settles a ship. She examined Soren, spoke to him in a low voice that was not gentle but was kind, and when she looked at the twins standing against the wall like furniture someone had forgotten to move, she did not tell them to leave. She did not tell them to stay. She simply noted their presence and continued her work. Corwin watched Soren's face. The Omega was not looking at him. He was focused on breathing, on the space between contractions, on the small notebook Pax had brought from the bookshop that Soren had asked for before anything else. The notebook was worn. The pages were filled with handwriting. Soren held it against his chest during contractions, his fingers pressed to the cover, and Corwin understood without asking that it was important. That whatever was in those pages was something Soren had built alone. Leith stood by the window, phone in hand, typing. He was documenting. He was sending the recording of Cass's call to the family's security team. He was dismantling a scheme that had been running for years, not with rage, but with the methodical precision of a man who had learned that fury only blurred the target. Cass had called back twice. Leith had not answered. At midnight, Soren's labor progressed. Dr. Calloway checked him and spoke quietly about the baby's positions, and Soren's face went pale in a way that had nothing to do with pain. Fear. Real fear. The same wariness Corwin had seen at the beginning, but deeper now, the fear of what came after the birth, when the bodies were no longer inside him and the protection of the pregnancy was gone. I need to push, Soren said. His voice cracked. Dr. Calloway nodded. Then we push. Corwin stepped forward. He did not plan it. His body moved before his mind caught up, and he was at the head of the bed, his hand on the rail, his presence a steady weight in Soren's periphery. I'm here, he said. It was not a question. It was not an offer. It was a fact. Soren looked at him. His eyes were bright with pain and something else. Something that might have been the beginning of surrender. You don't have to be. I know. You hurt me. I know. I don't forgive you yet. Corwin's throat closed. I know. Soren's jaw tightened. Another contraction. He pushed. His hand found Corwin's arm, not by choice, but by instinct, the way a drowning man grabs whatever is solid. Corwin did not move. He let Soren's fingers dig into his sleeve. He let the pain transfer through touch. Leith came to the other side. He did not touch. He stood where Soren could see him, his presence steady, his scent neutralized to something that would not overwhelm. He had learned control. He had learned it in the long months alone, when he had played piano every evening because the music was the only thing that held the grief at bay. Oliver was born first. He came into the world silent, his eyes open, his small fists already curled. The nurse placed him on Soren's chest, and Soren made a sound that Corwin would remember for the rest of his life. Not a cry, not a word, but a breath that carried everything he had been holding alone for 8 months. August followed 12 minutes later. He cried immediately. A strong, angry cry that announced his presence to everyone in the room. 2 boys. 2 lives that had been carried in silence, protected by a man who had been cast out by the very people who should have protected him. Corwin watched Soren hold them. The Omega's hands were shaking. His face was wet. He did not look at Corwin or Leith. He looked at his sons, and his scent, that faded lavender, flickered with something new. Something alive. Oliver, Soren whispered. And then, after a long pause, August. The nurse wrote the names on the chart. She asked about the father's section on the birth certificate. Soren's hands stilled. Corwin's alpha instincts howled. He wanted to say something. He wanted to claim them, to make it official, to undo every mistake he had ever made. But he stayed silent. He watched Soren's face, and he understood that this moment was not his. It belonged to Soren. It belonged to the man who had carried these children alone, who had worked a shift on his feet 8.5 months pregnant, who had collapsed in a bookshop and still had a notebook pressed to his chest. Soren looked at the form. He looked at the nurse. "Leaving it blank," he said. The nurse nodded. She did not ask questions. She filed the form. Leith's hand tightened on the rail. Corwin felt his brother's pain as though it were his own. But neither of them spoke. Neither of them argued. They stood in the silence of the room, watching an Omega hold their children, and they said nothing. That silence was its own conversation. Soren fell asleep an hour later, the babies in the hospital bassinet beside him, his hand resting on the edge as though he needed to feel them breathe. Dr. Calloway had cleared him for rest. The nurses had adjusted the lights. The room was quiet. Corwin and Leith did not leave. They stayed. Leith sat in the chair by the window, his phone dark now, his hand still. Corwin stood by the door, his back against the frame, watching Soren sleep. He was not guarding. He was not waiting for something to happen. He was simply present, the way a man is present when he has nowhere else to go and nothing else to prove. At 3 a.m., Soren stirred. He did not open his eyes. But his hand moved, reaching for the bassinet, touching the blanket that covered August's small body. "You can go," he said. His voice was thick with sleep. Corwin shook his head. Soren could not see him, but he knew. "I'm not leaving." "Why?" Corwin had no answer that would make sense. He had spent years being guided by instinct, by the certainty of his alpha nature, and every instinct he had told him to stay. But he had learned, in the months since Soren left, that instinct alone was not enough. He had to choose. He had to choose consciously, deliberately, with the full weight of his failures behind him. "Because you're here," he said finally, "and I'm not going to let you be alone again." Soren opened his eyes. He looked at Corwin. The weariness was still there. The pain was still there. But beneath it, something else. A crack in the wall so small that Corwin almost missed it. "That's not enough," Soren said. "I know. It's going to take a long time. I know. And I'm not going to make it easy." Corwin let out a breath he had been holding for 8 months. "I don't want easy. I want you." Soren closed his eyes. He did not respond. But his hand stayed on the blanket, and he did not tell Corwin to leave again. Leith rose from the chair. He walked to the bassinet. He looked down at Oliver, the silent one, the one who had been born with his eyes open, and his hand hovered over the small body without touching. An alpha who had learned restraint. An alpha who understood that some things had to be earned. "They have your eyes," Leith said quietly. Soren did not open his eyes. "They have yours, too." Leith's hand stilled. He did not respond. But his scent shifted, amber and smoke, warming with something that had been frozen for a long time. The night passed. Morning came grey through the window. The babies woke and were fed. Pax arrived with fresh clothes from the bookshop and a cup of tea from the cafe down the street, and he looked at the twins with the careful neutrality of a beta who understood the weight of what was happening. "The room is still there," Pax said to Soren. "Your things are safe." Soren nodded. He did not say he was coming back. The twins looked at each other. They had already discussed it. They had not discussed it aloud, because they did not need to. They were alphas. They understood each other in the spaces between words. They would not ask Soren to come home. They would not offer him a place in their house, or their estate, or their lives. Not yet. That was not the work that needed to be done. The work was simpler. The work was showing up. When Soren was discharged that afternoon, he did not go to Pax's apartment. He did not accept the offer of a hotel, or a safe house, or any of the resources the Ashfield name could provide. He held Oliver in one arm and August in the other, and he walked out of the hospital with a cab already called and a plan already made. He was going back to the room above the bookshop. The single room. The narrow bed. The window that faced the alley and the sky. Corwin watched him go. Leith stood beside him. "We don't knock," Leith said. "I know. We don't push. I know. We leave food. Once. With no note. Corwin's throat tightened. I know. They watched the cab pull away. And then they drove home, separately, because there was nothing else to do yet. The next morning, a container of soup appeared outside the door of the room above the bookshop. It was still warm. There was no note, no name, no explanation. Pax found it when he opened the shop. He looked at it. He carried it upstairs and set it outside Soren's door, and he did not say who it was from. Soren opened the door an hour later. He looked at the soup. He looked up and down the hallway, empty now, the scent of cedar and rain barely lingering in the air. He brought the container inside. He sat on the edge of his narrow bed, Oliver asleep in the bassinet beside him, August curled against his chest. And he ate. The first week was the hardest. Soren learned the rhythm of caring for two newborns alone in a room that was never designed for them. The single bed became a landing zone for feedings every 3 hours. The small desk became a changing station. The chair by the window, where he had once read in the evenings, when the shop was closed and the city was quiet, became the place where he sat with August at 3 a.m., watching the streetlights flicker. Oliver slept more than his brother. That was the personality detail that emerged quickly. Oliver was the watcher. Even as an infant, his eyes tracked movement, sound, light, cataloging the world before deciding whether to engage. August was the one who demanded. He cried when he was hungry, when he was wet, when he was lonely. He made sure the world knew he existed. Soren managed. That was what he did. He had been managing for 8.5 months, and he had become very good at it. But he was tired in a way that sleep could not fix. The exhaustion lived in his bones, in the spaces between his ribs, in the hollow place where hope used to be. He fed the babies. He changed the babies. He read to them at night from the notebook he had kept during the pregnancy. Lists of things he wanted to teach them, songs he wanted them to know, stories he wanted them to hear. He did not think about the twins. He did not allow himself to think about them. But he ate the soup. That was the crack. That was the small, unacknowledged surrender. The soup had come from a specific restaurant, one of the few in the city that still made bone broth the old way, with ginger and turmeric and a patience that had become rare. Soren recognized it immediately. He had eaten that soup dozens of times when he and the twins were together, in the cold months, when he came home from work and Corwin would have it waiting. He did not think about what it meant that Corwin remembered which restaurant. He did not think about what it meant that Leith had driven there, picked it up, brought it to the door of a room above a bookshop, and left without knocking. He ate it. He told himself it was because he needed the nutrition. He told himself it was because the babies deserved a mother who was healthy. He did not believe himself. But he ate it anyway. On the 4th day, another container appeared. This time it was stew, beef and root vegetables, slow-cooked until the meat fell apart. The same restaurant. The same absence of a note. Pax brought it up without comment. He had stopped asking. He simply appeared at Soren's door in the morning, the container in his hands, and set it down on the small table inside the room without a word. "You don't have to do this," Soren said on the 5th morning. Pax shrugged. "I'm not doing anything. I found it outside when I opened the shop." "Pax. I don't know who it's from, Soren." He met Soren's eyes. "And I'm not going to ask." They both knew he was lying. They both knew the truth. But Pax was a beater, and beaters understood the value of plausible deniability. He let Soren have the lie, because sometimes lies were kinder than the truth. On the 6th day, Soren took Oliver and August downstairs to the bookshop for the first time. Pax had cleared a corner near the window, a small area with a blanket on the floor and toys that he had bought without telling anyone. Soren stood in the doorway, Oliver in his arms, August sleeping in a carrier against his chest, and looked at that small corner. "You didn't have to do that," Soren said. "I know." Pax was behind the counter, sorting a stack of novels. "I wanted to." There was no pressure in his voice. No expectation. Just the simple fact of a friend making space. Soren sat down on the blanket. He laid Oliver beside him, the newborn's dark eyes tracking the ceiling fan. He opened a book, one of Pax's old children's books. The illustrations faded, and began to read aloud. Oliver watched him. August slept. The morning light came through the window, and for the first time in days, Soren felt something other than survival. At noon, the door of the shop opened. Soren did not look up immediately. He was used to customers, to the bell above the door, to the rhythm of people coming and going. But the silence that followed was different. Pax stopped moving. His sorting hands went still. Soren looked up. Corwin Ashfield stood in the doorway. He was in the doorway, not inside. His hand was on the frame, his body angled as though he was already half prepared to leave. He wore a simple jacket, dark, and his hair was windswept. He looked tired. Not the tiredness of a man who had not slept, the tiredness of a man who was holding himself together by conscious effort. His eyes went to Soren first, then to the babies. Something broke across his face. Something that was not quite grief and not quite wonder. A third thing, for which there was no name. Corwin. Soren's voice was flat, controlled. You're not supposed to be here. I know. Corwin did not move. The soup. Was it okay? Soren stared at him. You came here to ask about the soup. I came here to see if you were okay. Corwin's throat moved. And I came here to tell you that Cass is gone. We had security move him out of the city last night. He's not a threat anymore. He's not coming back. Soren said nothing. Oliver made a small sound, and Soren's hand moved automatically to soothe him. A gesture so practiced it happened without thought. Corwin watched the movement. He did not comment. He did not need to. That doesn't fix anything, Soren said finally. You know that. I know. Corwin's voice was quiet. I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just telling you, because you deserve to know. He stepped back. He was leaving. That was the thing about Corwin Ashfield. He had learned when to stay, and he had learned when to go. Right now, he was going, because staying would have been too much, and he understood that. I'll leave the food outside the door, he said. I won't knock. I won't stay. He turned. He opened the door. Corwin. He stopped. Soren's voice was barely a whisper. Oliver is the quiet one. He paused. August is the one who cries. Corwin did not turn around. His hand tightened on the doorframe. His scent, cedar and rain, flickered with something raw. Then he was gone. The door closed. Pax looked at Soren. Soren looked at his sons. That night, the food outside the door was different. Not soup. Not stew. It was a small container of rice pudding. The kind that Soren had mentioned once, years ago, in a different life, when he told Corwin that his grandmother used to make it for him when he was sick. Soren sat on the floor of his room, the container in his hands, and he did not know whether to laugh or cry. August cried. Oliver watched. And Soren, somewhere in the space between those two things, felt something that might have been the beginning of opening the door. The second week passed in a rhythm that was almost peaceful. Soren fell into a routine that worked for him and the babies. The bookshop became an extension of his home. He spent the afternoons in Pax's corner, reading or helping when he could, the twins in their carrier or on the blanket. Customers cooed over them. Some asked about the father. Soren smiled and gave an answer that was not an answer. The food continued. Every morning, a container was waiting. The twins had figured out a schedule. They alternated days, Soren realized, because sometimes the container was from a place Corwin favored, and sometimes it was from a place Leith had mentioned once. He could tell the difference by the style of the packaging, the handwriting on the receipt, the small differences in temperature. He tracked the schedule without meaning to. Corwin on Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays. Leith on Tuesdays, Thursdays. Weekends were unpredictable. Sometimes both, sometimes neither. He did not thank them. He did not acknowledge them. He simply ate. On the 10th day, Pax brought up an envelope with the food. No note. Just a key. Soren looked at it and knew immediately what it was. A key to the Ashfield estate. The one he had left on the kitchen counter when he walked out, 8 months ago. He left the key on the table. He did not touch it. But he did not throw it away. On the 12th day, Oliver smiled for the first time. It was not a real smile, the kind that newborns sometimes do, the reflex that means nothing. But Soren told himself it was real. He told himself that Oliver had seen something he liked. That night, he wrote in his notebook. He wrote down the date and the time and the way Oliver's lips had curved. He wrote down what August had done that day, a new sound, a longer stretch of sleep. He wrote down the things he wanted to remember. And at the bottom of the page, he wrote, 2 weeks. He did not know what that meant. He did not know why he had written it. But he left it there, a small acknowledgement of something passing. On the 15th day, Leith appeared. It was evening. The bookshop was closed. Soren was upstairs, Oliver and August asleep in the bassinet. When he heard it, a knock at the back door, the one that led to the alley behind the shop. Not the front door. Not the room door. The back door. The one no one used. Soren went down the stairs slowly. He opened the door a crack. Leith Ashfield stood in the alley. He was holding a guitar case. "I'm not here to talk," Leith said. His voice was the same, steady, quiet, the kind that carried weight because it never rose. "I'm here to play." Soren stared at him. "What?" "Music. For the babies." Leith shifted the case. "My father used to play for me when I was young. I don't remember much of him, but I remember that." Soren could have said no. He should have said no. This was a trick, a manipulation, a way to get closer. But he looked at Leith's face, that steady, quiet face, the face of an alpha who had learned to hold silence like a virtue, and he saw something he recognized. Loneliness. The same loneliness Soren carried. "Upstairs," Soren said. 10 minutes. Leith nodded. He followed Soren up the stairs, careful to be quiet, careful to stay in Soren's peripheral vision where he could be watched. He set the case on the floor near the window. He took out the guitar, an old acoustic, worn at the edges, clearly loved. He played. It was not a lullaby. It was something softer, a melody Soren did not recognize, slow and patient, the kind of music that asked nothing of the listener. Leith's hands moved over the strings the way they had once moved over piano keys, with a precision that came from years of practice and grief. Oliver stirred. His dark eyes opened. He looked toward the sound. August slept through the entire thing. Leith played for 10 minutes. When he finished, he put the guitar back in the case, closed it, and stood. "Thank you," Soren said. The words were out before he could stop them. Leith looked at him. Something passed between them, not forgiveness, not yet, but recognition. The acknowledgement of two men who had been broken by the same thing and were trying, in different ways, to find their way back. "I'll leave it at the door," Leith said, "in case you want it again." He left. Soren stood at the window and watched him walk down the alley, his shadow long in the streetlight. The next morning, the guitar case was outside the door. Soren brought it inside. He set it in the corner, next to the bassinet. He did not open it. But he did not tell Pax to return it either. On the 18th day, Soren opened the door. It was morning. The food was there, scrambled eggs and toast, still warm. Soren picked it up. And then he did something he had not done in 18 days. He walked down the stairs. He opened the front door of the bookshop. And he looked. Corwin was there. He was standing on the other side of the street, hands in his pockets, watching the shop. He was not hiding. He was simply there, the way a sentry is there, present without intrusion. He saw Soren. He did not move. Soren did not wave. He did not call out. He simply stood in the doorway, holding the container of eggs, and met Corwin's eyes. A full minute passed. Then Soren went back inside. He closed the door. He sat down at the small table in his room, and he ate the eggs, and he thought about the look on Corwin's face. Not hunger. Not desperation. Just presence. The way a man shows up when he has nothing left to prove. On the 20th day, Soren made a decision. He was not ready to forgive. He was not ready to trust. But he was ready to stop pretending that he did not see them. He wrote a note. 3 words on a piece of torn paper. Thursday, 6 p.m. Upstairs. He left it outside the door the next morning, under the container of food. He did not sign it. He did not seal it. He simply left it, and then he went back inside, and he spent the day pretending he had not done anything at all. That afternoon, Oliver smiled again. A real smile this time. August made a sound that was almost a laugh. And Soren, for the first time in 20 days, felt something that was not quite hope, but was close. He waited for Thursday. He did not know what would happen. He did not know if they would come, or if he wanted them to, or what it would mean if they did. But he had written the note. He had left it. And he had not taken it back. That was the first step. After 20 days of closed doors and silent meals, it was the first step toward opening the door. And somewhere across the city, two alphas felt the shift. A change in the air, a loosening in the chest, the beginning of something they had been waiting for since the moment Soren left. They would be there on Thursday. They were already getting ready. Thursday arrived the way most days had arrived lately, with Oliver waking first, his dark eyes finding the ceiling, and August demanding attention before he was fully conscious. Soren moved through the morning routine on autopilot, feeding, changing, settling, until both boys were content and the small room above the bookshop felt almost manageable. He did not think about 6 p.m. He told himself he was not thinking about it. He thought about it all day. Pax noticed. Pax noticed everything. When Soren brought the babies downstairs at noon, Pax took one look at him and said nothing, which was Pax's way of saying everything. He simply handed Soren a cup of tea and went back to sorting inventory. By 4 p.m., Soren had changed his shirt 3 times. By 5 p.m., he had stopped pretending he was calm. He sat on the edge of the bed, Oliver in his arms, August in the bassinet, and he stared at the door. He had not told them what to bring. He had not told them what he wanted. He had written 3 words on a piece of paper. Thursday. 6 p.m. Upstairs, and he had left it under a container of food like a message in a bottle. Now it was 5:47 p.m., and he had no idea what he was going to say. At 5:58 p.m., he heard footsteps on the stairs. 2 sets. Steady. Unhurried. The kind of footsteps that belonged to men who had learned patience the hard way. Soren stood. He adjusted Oliver in his arms. He walked to the door. He opened it before they could knock. Corwin and Leith stood on the landing. They were dressed simply. No suits, no displays of wealth. Corwin in a dark sweater. Leith in a jacket that had seen better days. They looked like men who had come to a place they were not sure they were welcome. Corwin's hand was half raised, stopped mid-motion. He lowered it. The 3 of them stood there. The silence stretched. Soren stepped back. He left the door open. The twins looked at each other. Then they stepped inside. The room was small. The twins filled more of it than Soren had anticipated. Corwin's shoulders seemed to take up the space near the window. Leith found the only chair and sat in it with a carefulness that suggested he was afraid of breaking something. Oliver was in Soren's arms, awake, watching the strangers with the same quiet intensity he watched everything else. August was in the bassinet, already asleep, unaware that anything had changed. There was no script for this. "I don't know why I asked you to come," Soren said. His voice came out flatter than he intended. "I don't know what I want from this." Corwin's hands were at his sides. He had not moved. "You don't have to know. Don't tell me what I have to do." "I wasn't." Corwin's voice was gentle. "I'm just saying, we're here. You asked. That's enough." Leith leaned forward. His gaze was on Oliver, the quiet one, the watcher. Oliver stared back at him, unblinking. "He looks like you," Leith said. His voice was quiet, almost to himself. Soren's throat tightened. "He looks like himself." A small smile touched Leith's mouth. "I know, but there's something, around the eyes. Something familiar." Soren did not respond. He did not know how to respond. He looked at his son and tried to see what Leith was seeing. He could not. He had spent too long looking at Oliver from the inside, from the place where a parent sees the child before the reflection. "May I hold him?" The question came from Corwin. Soft. careful. He did not reach out. He did not step forward. He simply asked, and then waited, and the waiting was the most important part. Soren considered it. His instincts said no. His survival instincts said that giving them anything was dangerous, that holding the babies would mean something, that allowing them close would open a door he had spent 8.5 months building walls to protect. But he had already opened the door. That was what the 3 words meant. That was what this Thursday meant. He crossed the room. He placed Oliver in Corwin's arms. Corwin's breath caught. He looked down at the small boy, the dark hair, the watchful eyes, the tiny fingers that curled against nothing. An alpha holding his child for the first time, 8.5 months too late. "Hi," Corwin whispered. His voice broke on the word. Oliver blinked. He did not cry. He looked at Corwin's face the way he looked at everything. Fully, carefully, deciding. Leith watched from the chair. His hands were still. His scent, amber and smoke, carried warmth, carried longing, carried the kind of grief that only comes from knowing what you missed. Soren watched both of them. He sat on the edge of the bed, August still sleeping beside him, and he tried to find a way to say what he was feeling. He failed. The silence was easier. The silence did not require words. Corwin sat down on the floor, Oliver in his arms, cross-legged and careful. Leith stayed in the chair, his presence steady enough to hold the space. No one spoke. The light shifted through the window. The sounds of the city filtered in, distant and unremarkable. It was not healing. It was not forgiveness. It was something simpler. 4 people in a room, breathing the same air, not running. 45 minutes passed. Soren fed August. Leith played a quiet melody on the guitar, something soft that made Oliver's eyelids droop. Corwin stayed on the floor, one hand lightly resting on Oliver's back, as though he was memorizing the weight. At 6:47 p.m., Corwin looked up at Soren. "We should go," he said, "before we overstay." Soren did not argue. He nodded. Corwin stood. He handed Oliver back to Soren with a care that was almost reverent. His fingers brushed Soren's wrist. An accident, or not, Soren could not tell. "We'll leave food in the morning," Leith said. He was packing the guitar. "Same schedule." "You don't have to." "I know." Corwin reached the door. He paused. He did not turn around. "Soren." His voice was quiet. "Thank you." "For what?" "For opening the door." He left. Leith followed. The door closed behind them with a soft click. Soren stood in the middle of the room, Oliver in one arm, August in the other, and he felt the silence settle around him like a weight and a gift. He sat down. He looked at his sons. "Your fathers are idiots," he said. Oliver blinked. August slept on. "But they're here," Soren said, and he did not know if he was talking to them or to himself. The next day, the food was there. A container of soup that was not from any restaurant. It was homemade. Soren recognized the handwriting on the lid. Leith's. Neat and precise, a small recipe card tucked under the lid. Bone broth. Ginger. Turmeric. Your grandmother's recipe, as close as I could remember. L. Soren read the card 3 times. He had mentioned his grandmother's soup exactly once, in passing, years ago. Leith had remembered. Leith had found the recipe. Leith had made it himself. He ate the soup. He saved the card. That afternoon, Soren took the babies downstairs. Pax's corner had expanded. A small rug, a basket of toys that had not been there before. Soren did not ask where they came from. He already knew. At 5 p.m., while Pax was helping a customer, Soren walked to the front door of the shop. He looked out at the street. Corwin was there. Across the road. Hands in his pockets. He was not watching the shop. He was watching the window. The window of the room above the shop. Soren did not wave. He did not go out. But he did not close the door right away either. The routine became a rhythm. Food appeared every morning. Twice a week, the guitar case was outside the door. Soren opened it now. He had started playing, badly, in the evenings, the same melody Leith had played that first time. He was learning. Corwin was on the street most days. Not always. Sometimes the street was empty. But when Soren looked, Corwin was usually there, a steady presence across the road, never closer, never farther. On the 25th day, Soren left the door unlocked. He did not tell them. He did not announce it. He simply stopped locking it at night, and in the morning, when he woke, the door was still closed. No one had come in. No one had tried. But the door was open. Symbolically. Really. On the 26th day, Soren wrote another note. You can come in, but you have to ask first. He left it under the food container. That evening, there was a knock. Soren opened the door. Corwin stood on the landing. May I come in? He asked. Soren stepped back. And this time, the door did not close behind him. The real healing began in the small moments. Not in grand gestures or dramatic conversations. In the way Corwin learned to change a diaper without being asked. In the way Leith arrived every Tuesday and Thursday with the guitar, playing until Oliver's eyes grew heavy. In the way Soren started leaving the door unlocked, and then started leaving it open a crack, and then realized one day that he had stopped checking the lock entirely. Oliver started smiling at Corwin. Not every time, but sometimes. A small, deliberate curve of his mouth that made Corwin's breath catch every single time. August started reaching for Leith. It was the Leith who could soothe him during the fussy evenings. The one who knew how to hold him so he could see the whole room. The one who sang old songs that no one else remembered. Soren watched. He did not say anything. But he saw. On the 30th day, Soren made dinner. He did not tell them it was happening. He simply cooked a simple pasta with vegetables. The first real meal he had made for anyone other than himself in months. He set the small table. He put out 3 plates. He called down the stairs, if you're hungry. Corwin and Leith came up. They ate in near silence. The babies slept in the corner. The light through the window was soft and golden. Halfway through the meal, Corwin reached across the table. His hand hovered over Soren's, not quite touching. I don't expect anything, he said. I need you to know that I'm sorry. Not because I want you to forgive me. Because I need you to know that I understand what I did. Soren looked at his hand. Then at Corwin's face. I know, Soren said. I've seen it. In the food. In the way you hold Oliver. In the way you wait. Corwin did not move his hand. I'm not ready, Soren said. But I'm not closing the door again. That's what I have right now. Leith set down his fork. That's enough. Soren looked at both of them. The 2 men who had broken him and then spent 30 days rebuilding. One small action at a time. Okay, he said. And he took Corwin's hand. It was not a declaration. It was not a promise. It was just a hand, held across a small table in a small room above a bookshop, while 2 babies slept and the evening light turned golden and the city outside kept moving. But it was the first time Soren had reached back. And that, in the end, was the whole story. If this story stayed with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next one. The door was open now. Not fixed. Not healed. But open. And open, Soren had learned, was enough for now.